Welcome to this tutorial series on building a calculator app. Now this is going to be a fairly simple calculator app. I'll go ahead and show you what it looks like here. It's just a pretty standard calculator. You can add, you can subtract, you can divide, you can multiply, and then you can negate, you can do whatever you want. And as you enter your functions, this calculator is going to be saving all of the functions that you've entered previously, and it's going to be displaying them in the history section up top. So it's a fairly basic app to create. So we'll go ahead and get started here. We're going to be using Jetpack Compose for the UI design, which is a declarative approach to writing Android UIs that came out a little less than a year ago at this point. I think July of 2022. And then we're going to be pairing that with a view model to track the state. So let's go ahead and get started here. The first thing we're going to do is go ahead and make a new project. So pull up your new project window and go to empty compose activity. And we can name that whatever we want to name that. And while that's loading here, I'll just give you a brief rundown of what we're going to go over in this video. So in this video, we're going to do all the dependencies, and then we're going to set up the basic package hierarchy, and then we're going to add a couple classes that we're going to need to actually go ahead and build our UI. And I typically like to do the UI as soon as possible, just because it feels like I've done a lot more when I have something I can look at instead of just code running in the background. So we're going to build just a couple classes that are required for building the UI. And then in the next video, we'll start building the UI. We'll build the keypad. And in the video after that, we're going to go ahead and finish the UI with that the display screen and then the history display as well. So let's go ahead and get started here. First thing, jump on into your Gradle scripts. We're going to update some of these dependencies. Let me put my phone back where it goes on this side. Okay, so in here, Android, and this is even the newest Android Studio, it's going to default you to 1.2.2, which is fine. That would work for what we want to do here, but I like to have all of my dependencies running at the newest stable version. So we're going to go ahead and update all of those. So then in our module level build.gradle file, we're going to go ahead and change this Kotlin compiler extensions to 1.4. And then all of these that are yellow, you can just right click and update. Change to 1.9, change to 2.5.1, change to 1.6.1, change to 1.3.1, and then all of these with the Compose UI version, those are going to be updated when we sync it because we applied that right here. So if I go ahead and sync that now, now everything is up to date and we're using the latest models on everything. Actually, are we? No, we're not. Let's actually update Kotlin to 1.8.0 as well. Just because I like to run on the most recent stable versions of everything. What we're doing would work on 1.7, but just for good practice, I like to use the newest. And then, okay, well, let's jump right in here. So this is our calculator here. And if you look at this, there's a fairly easy pattern to the number pad, right? You have 0 through 9. And then after that, you have your operators and a clear button. AC, by the way, stands for all clear. So if I type whatever number I type, and then if I hit AC, that's going to clear out everything. So all clear, and then backspace. So I can clear that. So these are pretty common here. So what we're going to do is we're going to create all of the buttons, and we're going to store them in a list, and then we're going to loop through that list and create the UI that way instead of having having a separate composable call for each button here. So to do that, we are going to need to have a object, a data object that we can use to represent a button. So the first thing that we're going to do is come into our calculator class. And I know this is a fairly simple app, but I'm still going to go ahead and do a domain and a presentation layer. Just because I like to keep things consistent. So there's our domain and our presentation layer. And now if you go into your domain package, we are going to want to build some data to represent this button. So go to new Kotlin class or file, and this is going to be a data class. And we're just going to call this button data. And inside this button data class, we are going to have just a text variable that's going to be a string. And that's just going to be the text that we want displayed on the button. And then we're going to have an onPress variable, which is actually going to be a function, because every time we click one of these variables, we're going to want to perform a function. So we're going to save that in the onPress variable here. And then that is all we need in that class. Also in our domain package, I'm going to create a sealed class. So new Kotlin class or file, sealed class. And this is going to be, I'm going to call it math operation. And this is going to store all of the different options for what type of math operation you can perform inside of our calculator. So a sealed class is essentially, it's really useful if you have a finite set of possibilities that you want to pick from and you need to map them. And then it pairs really well with a when statement after that. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to create a sealed class with all of our operators, all of our mathematical operators, and then we're going to pair that with a when statement when we get to our view model. But for now, we're going to pass into our sealed class as a parameter a symbol, and that's going to be a string. And then inside of that sealed class, we are just going to create an object for each of these. So object addition, and that's going to be a math operation. And our symbol there is going to be the addition sign. And then you got to spell these right too. Subtraction, and that's going to be a math operation again. And our symbol for that one is going to be the minus sign. And then multiplication. And our symbol for that one, we're going to use an X. You could also use an asterisk, but I'm just going to use an X for what we're doing here. And then lastly, we have division. Which is also going to be a math operation, and we'll give it that slash. Okay, so that is all that we need for our math operation sealed class. But a math operation is not the only thing that we can press on our keyboard. We can also press a number, or we can press backspace or clear. So I'm going to go ahead and in here make another sealed class, and we're going to give it the full set of possibilities that we can press on the keyboard. So this one we're just going to call button action, because this is an action that can come from any button press. Yeah, whoops, same thing. Let's make that a sealed class. And then this one shouldn't need any parameters. You're going to have a clear, which is a button action. Backspace, which is also a button action. Equals, which is also going to be a button action. Another one, decimal button action because we have the decimal button on there, and then negation. That's going to be a button action as well. And then after negation, we're going to do a data class for our operation. And that is going to take operation of type math operation, and that's going to spit back a, whoops, why do I have parentheses there? And that's going to give back a type button action, and then another data class for our number press. And that one will go ahead and use an int, and that is also going to be a button action return. So in here now you can see we have the full set of everything that we'll need for any of the actions on the buttons on our calculator. You have your clear, you have your backspace, you have your equals, you have all of your math operations and your negation, and then your decimal and any numbers. So this class right here is going to pair very well with the when statement when we get to our view model. So just one more thing that we're going to need here before we actually start building the UI, and that will be our calculator state. So if we come down into our presentation layer, do a new Kotlin class or file, and we're just going to call this calculator state. And within our calculator state, this is actually going to be a data class. Within our calculator state for the data parameters, we are going to go ahead and hand it, well, we'll need two numbers. So if you look on our calculator, you have 9 divided by 3. In your equation, you have your 9, and then you have your 3. So we definitely need two numbers. So we're just going to call those number 1. And I'm going to save these as strings because we're displaying them as strings. You could do them as double if you wanted alternatively, and that potentially for precision and some other reasons that might be a better approach in the long run. But I'm just going to do strings for now because that's what we're going to be displaying our data as, and that'll just be simpler. And then let's see, we're going to need a display number. So that would be this 3 down here. You see we have 9 divided by 3, and then we have this 3, which is going to alternate between these two. So if I have nothing entered, it'll be nothing. But if I hit 0 or 8, it's going to display number 1. And then if I divide that by, say, 2, now it's displaying the second number I put in. So this display number is going to hop back and forth between displaying number 1 and number 2. Or potentially 0 if I don't have any number. So we're just going to make that a string as well, and we're going to give that a default number of 0, because if we clear out our calculator, you can see that now we have nothing in our state. We have no numbers, no number 1 and no number 2, but 0 is being displayed, and that's typically how calculators work. If there's no number in, it's going to display as 0 instead of just nothing. And then we're going to have an operation, which is going to be of type math operation, and that is going to be nullable because before we click an operation button, we're not going to have any operation. So we're going to set that to null by default, and we'll overwrite that whenever the user clicks an operation button. And then we're going to have our current equation, which is going to be a string that we're using to display this equation above the main number I'm entering. This equation up here, we're just going to dump that into a string, and we're going to call that current equation. And then I'm going to have a list of type string that we call equations, and that is what we're going to use to keep track of this list of all the equations that we've put in the past. So essentially that's going to be our history list. And initially we're going to set that equal to just an empty list. So that is really all that we'll need before we jump right in and start building our UI. Let me change just one more thing actually. These colors that we're using on here, I'm just going to define them in our colors.kt file. So I'm going to put a blue, which is going to be color, and then you are welcome to just copy these or use whatever color you want. So we're going to have a color defined for this blue button here, and then for our gray background and for our lighter gray background for the screen and for the history display. So our background gray is going to be this one. And then I'm going to call the other one our screen background. Okay, so now we have that blue, we have a medium gray, and then a little bit lighter gray that we've defined up here. So now we should have everything that we need to start building our UI. And in the next video, we'll go ahead and start building that keypad. I'm going to put all of the code from this video on GitHub, and you can access that link down in the description below. And we will see you in the next video.